Masechet Nedarim Daf Ayin Bet. We begin with a question. Iba'i alehu gerushin kishtika damya or kahakama damya. If a man and woman are a man is mikudeshet to a woman, she makes a vow, and he doesn't say anything, but then they get divorced. So that getting divorced, is that the same as remaining quiet? Or is the act of divorcing similar to a ratification of the vow? Interestingly, we don't say that it's like nullifying the vow. You might think that, since he said, she makes the vow, he says, I'm out of here. Maybe that would be the same as nullifying it. But no, that's not one of the options. The option is he didn't nullify it. So is it like being quiet, or does it ratify? Now, what's the difference? He's out of the picture anyway, isn't he? Oh, it does make a difference. For example, if this groom heard the vow, divorced her, and remarried her, or did kiddushin again on the very same day. And here's the difference. Since he heard it on that day, he divorced, he remarried, so he's the husband again. It's on the same day. So since he was considered like quiet before, and it's still the same day, so it's as if nothing happened. And then he can, in between, and he's married to her, and he can nullify it. We saw before, even a new husband can nullify it. So certainly the same husband. However, if, however, you say that it's like it's being ratified, well then, by divorcing her, if that's considered a ratification, then he cannot come afterwards and nullify it, because you can't nullify it after you ratify it, not even on the same day. Why would you think that it's like ratifying it? Because since he divorces her, he's not going to be able to nullify it when they're divorced. So it's effectively closing the window of opportunity on nullification. Usually window of opportunity is that day, the day that the husband hears about it, until sunset or until it gets dark. And by divorcing, he's saying, "Oh, that's it. I don't want to. I'm closing the window now because he won't be able to." And so therefore, I might think that itself is a ratification because there is no possibility for his nullifying it afterwards. Although, if he does remarry her, then he would have been able to nullify it had it in other circumstances. But since he did divorce her, and divorce is like ratification, therefore he cannot, even after he cannot nullify it, even after he does remarry her. That is the question. We're going to try to bring a proof from the Braita that we already know. Tashema has two parts. When do we say that when the groom dies, then the father gets the full rights to nullify his own rights and even that of the groom? Only when the groom either did not hear about it at all, or heard about it and he nullified it, or he heard about it and he was quiet, and the groom died on that day, but he didn't ratify it, and so as long as he didn't ratify it, then and he dies, then the father gets to do it. Okay, notice that it only mentions a case of dying. And if you say that divorce is the same as being quiet, then it should also include in this text a case of in this Braita should also include if he heard about it and divorced, because divorce would also be true that it's not like ratification, and therefore the father can do it. Once it doesn't say that, we can conclude that divorce is like ratification. That's why it's not on this list. It would seem to be a good proof if we take this list as davka, meaning only these, and we're not, and excludes everything else. However, here's the problem. Emasefa, the continuation of the Braita says, Aval im shama v'kiyem, if the groom heard about it when he was alive and he ratified it and then died afterwards, or shama v'shatak umet bayom shel lachalav, or he heard about it, it was quiet on that whole day, and he only died the next day. In either of those two cases, the vow is ratified by the groom, and yachol lafer, then the father no longer can annul it after the death of the husband. So notice this clause also mentions only death, not divorce. If you say that divorce is like ratification, then it should also say, and if he heard about it and divorced her. So heard about divorce is like ratification, and then also the father wouldn't be able to annul it. Since it doesn't mention that case, we can derive that divorce is like being quiet. And so we come to opposite conclusions depending on if we focus on the Resha or focus on the Sefa. And therefore we see that we cannot learn anything from this Braita. It just simply wasn't talking about this case, or it's ambiguous, right? Because Resha dafka naseb Sefa mishum Resha, Sefa dafka naseb Resha mishum Sefa. If we take the first half of it as being precise, and it's on purpose that it excluded Gerushin, well then we'll have to take the rest. Then the truth is, all we would need is the Resha, because then you could infer everything else from the Sefa. So the Sefa is just there, by the way. Then yes, if you take the first half as being precise, then you'll learn that divorce is like ratification. But on the other hand, we can equally take the Sefa as being precise, these cases and only these cases. And then in that case, why didn't include more cases in the Resha? Oh, maybe this wants to be in parallel, since the Sefa was talking about death, so the Resha only talking about death and not talking about divorce cases. But since it's totally ambiguous, because you could focus on one or focus on the other, so we have no proof from here. All right, another proof from their Mishnah. Tashema nadravihi asura nitkarashav nitaresa bo bayom afilu lemea. If she made a vow while she is mikudeshet to a groom, and she gets divorced, and she gets mikudeshet again on the very same day, even 100 times, the father and the very last groom can undo the vow. Oh, shmamina gerushin kishtikat damu. Isn't that a good proof that divorce is like being quiet? After all, if divorce was like ratification, then how would the last groom be able to nullify it? Since she was divorced before, right? How could the last groom nullify a vow that was ratified by the divorce of the earlier one? So it seems to be a good proof that divorce is in fact like being quiet, right? No, not necessarily. Maybe the first groom didn't hear about it, and if you don't hear about it and he dies, well then that's not like ratifying it, because it didn't even come to his attention. It was not even presented to him. Okay, I mean the window of opportunity didn't even open, so you can't say that divorce closes it. Hold on. If that's the case, then why does the Mishnah have to say that she divorced and remarried on the same day? Even after 100 days, it would be the same thing. In other words, if she made the vow while engaged to the first husband, and her first husband didn't hear about it, and then she's divorced, and then 100 days later, she gets engaged to some other guy. Well, because he never heard about it, none of the grooms heard about it until the last one. So then the window of opportunity only opens at that point, and then that later groom would be able to annul it, even though it's 100 days after. Right? A groom doesn't have to nullify a vow on the same day that the bride makes it, only on the same day that he hears about it. And so that can't be the case of the Mishnah, because the Mishnah says it has to be the very same day. So we answer, Kishelo shama arus v'shama ha'av debo bayom hu de maseh mefer, aval mikan ve'elach lo maseh mefer. Oh no, in fact, the Mishnah does make sense why it has to be the same day. because talking about a case where the groom did not hear, but the father did hear on that day. And that's the law. Once either one of them hears, that opens the window of opportunity, and both of them have to nullify it on the same day. So since the father heard about it, even though the groom didn't hear about it, that groom dies. So since the father heard about it on that day, only on that day can it be nullified. If it's 100 days later, it cannot be nullified. That's why it has to be on the same day. But we can still say we're talking about a case where the first groom didn't hear about it, and therefore there's no proof from the Mishnah that when a groom does hear about it and divorces, then that is like being quiet. Maybe if he did hear about it, it would be like ratification, and he or a later groom would not be able to nullify it. This Mishnah is only when the first groom didn't hear about it. Okay, so let's try again. Tashema nadra bo bayom gersha vecheziraha bo bayom en yachol lehafer. A braita that says if she made a vow on a certain day, and then she is divorced and returns and does kiddushin again on the very same day, the groom cannot undo the vow. So we can see from here that the divorce is like ratification, and that's why it says that he cannot nullify it. Otherwise, why would he not be able to nullify it? We answer, you thought we were talking about a groom and bride that were just mikudashot. They only did kiddushin. No, with this baraita is talking about someone who is fully married. Because we have a rule, we saw this rule way at the beginning of the Perek, that a husband who is married, right, a full husband, cannot nullify any vows that were taken before the marriage started. The husband is like a new, it's a cutoff point. And anything the husband only has a right. Husband is stronger in the sense that he has a full power over his wife's vows and doesn't need the father, but it also comes with a detriment, which is that only applies to vows that she made after the full marriage. The reason why it's different for someone who's for a groom who did kiddushin but not nisuin, over there a groom, interestingly, can nullify vows even that were taken beforehand, because the bride took them while under the authority of the father, and since the groom and the father work together, so then he is connected to it. So in other words, if you have a 11 and a half, 12-year-old who makes a vow while single, and the father then has the right to undo it, but the father didn't hear about it yet, and then she gets engaged, she does kiddushin to a man. Well, now the man has some authority, but not full authority, only half with the father. But since she made it while under the father's authority, well, of course, I mean, as long as she was alive, she was under the father, and therefore that groom can and would need to undo it together with the father, even though it was made before the kiddushin. But none of that applies with nisuin, because with nisuin she is no longer under the authority of the father. So anything she made with the father was back with the father's domain. Now she enters a new domain, and that of her husband fully, and so therefore this full authority of the husband only applies to vows she made while she is fully married. Okay, so this principle is going to be needed in order to understand the next Mishnah. דרך תלמידי חכמים עד שלא הייתה ביתו יוסעה מאצלו אומר לה כל נדרים שנדרת בתוך ביתי הרי הן מופרים. There was the way of תלמידי חכמים, sages, people who are wise. They do this is good advice, that before their daughter would go and marry someone else, he would say, any vows that you had under my roof while with me, they are hereby annulled. In other words, the day before the nisuin, while the father still has authority, now anything that the father heard about it, presumably he either decided to annul it or not, and those would be ratified. But what about any vows that the daughter made and the father didn't yet know about it? So the father will make a declaration over all her vows and say, all vows that you made are going to be nullified, because from on the next day they're going to be married. She's going to be married, and then the husband, the future husband, will not be able to nullify any of those previous vows. And that way, this is the last chance the father can have to undo those vows and let her go into the marriage clean. וכן הבעל עד שלא תיכנס לרשותו, אומר לה, קודם שדעת עד שלא תיכנסי לרשותי, הרי הן מופרים, מי שתיכנס לרשותו, אינו יכול להפר. And similarly, the husband, while they're still in the state of kiddushin, the day before the nisuin, or the hour before nisuin, will say, before we do nisuin here, he says to her, any vows that you made before you're going to come into my domain, before nisuin, they are all nullified, because once she enters, he will not be able to nullify it anymore. This is the last chance that he gets. So this is good advice, so that you won't be surprised afterwards. Oh, I had a vow from before that I'm not gonna live in New York. I says, well, you never told me that vow. So that way you get rid of all of them from now. Good. The question is, can a husband nullify something that he didn't hear about? Right? That's what seems about from these cases here, that they don't even know the content of the vow. So is that legitimate? Can you nullify across the board a general thing, even if you didn't actually hear about it? The answer is V'shama isha davkahu. Or lavta davkahu, because when the pasuk says, and her husband hears about it, does that mean that he has to hear specifically about the particular thing? Or not necessarily, maybe even a generality. He doesn't have to actually hear about the contents. Let's see if we can answer it. Amarava tashema derech tamid hachamim ad shelo yasat bito me'eslo omer la kol nedarim shenadart betoch beti harehen mufarin v'halo shama. Here's a proof from our Mishnah that we just read, that the way of sages was that before their daughter is going to go get married, they would say, all vows are nullified. So you see that you can nullify a vow even though you don't actually know, you didn't even hear about the content. And the answer, we reject that. No, what he means to say is, I am saying this from now so that when I hear it, when I hear the contents of that, I want it to be nullified, right? So not that it's going to be automatically nullified at that point that he makes the declaration. He's just making a pre-declaration that should cover things that he does hear about in particular in the future. Okay, so maybe, but im ken, ki lo shama lama le'lememad. Hold on, if he didn't hear about anything, then why would he bother saying it? Why not just wait until the father does hear about a particular vow, and when he hears about it, then he'll say, oh, I nullify that vow. In other words, if he has to hear about it, it doesn't work until he hears about it, then what's the point of preempting? This teaches us that the way of Torah scholars is to pursue such matters, do some investigations. Listen, I want to nullify any vows that you ever made. Hey, you have any vows, right? Can you tell them to me now? And that way he can nullify them. But they're not automatically nullified across the board. He does have to first hear it and then nullify it. Okay, so no proof from there. Tashma misefa. How about from the continuation of the Mishnah? Okay, so also from the husband, it says until, even before they get married, actually before they get married, he says, any vows that you have, I want all nullified. Doesn't that sound like, yes, you can nullify things even though you don't know them in particular? No, here also, the husband is saying, when I will hear about a particular vow, then I want it to be nullified. There's no possibility of him nullifying a generality, all vows, that he does not hear about it. He's just making a declaration so that she will, at that point, say, oh, you want to know about my vows? So this is a way of him pursuing, checking out, finding vows, so that then when she says the particular, then he will be able to nullify it. So no proof from there. Oh, let's try again. Tashema. האומר לאשתו כל נדרים שתידורי עד שאבוא ממקום פלוני הרי הן קיימין לא אמר כלום הרי הן מופרין רבי אליעזר אומר מופר והלא שמע. Here we have a braita that teaches, actually it's a Mishnah in Masechet Nedarim, that teaches, someone says to his wife, all vows that you make until I come back from that place, while I'm away, right? I'm not going to be here, but while I'm away, they should all be ratified. That does not work. You can't ratify something for the future because you can't ratify something that doesn't yet exist. So that is nothing. But here's the proof is from the next part. If he says they are all nullified, right? Anything that you make, any vows that you make from till I come back is nullified. Rabbi Eliezer says it works. Hold on, but he certainly didn't hear about it, right? He's away. It didn't even happen yet. And so isn't this a good proof that yes, you can nullify a vow, even though you didn't hear about you hear about it in particular? We say no. Hachaname damar lechi shama'na. What he means here also is when I hear about the vow, I'm going to want it to be nullified. That's why he's saying it. So we ask, v'lama limin hashta, then what's the point of saying it from now? Just eventually, when he hears about it, after he gets back, let him nullify it on the day that he hears about it. And the answer is, lechi shama lefer la. That's all part of the question. Lama limin hashta lechi shama lefer la. Why from now? When he hears about it, let him nullify it. The answer is, kasabar dilma mat niridana hahi sha'ata. Maybe he'll be preoccupied at that moment and he won't be able to nullify it. He's going to hear about it while he's in the middle of an important meeting. He's not going to have time to nullify it. The meeting's over. He's going to forget about it. He wants to make it clear from now that all vows that you will make until I get back, these will all be nullified. Even when I hear them, then they should be automatically nullified, even if I happen to be too busy to nullify it. All right, so no proof from there, because it only takes effect when he hears about it in particular. So let's try another proof. Tashema haomed la'apotropos kol nedarim shenederet ishti mikan va'ad she'avo mimakom peloni hafer והפר לה, יכול יהיו מופרים, תלמוד לומר, אישה יקימנו ואישה יפרנו, דברי רבי יאשיהו. Similar to the previous case, but now we introduce a steward. A guy's going away, and he appoints someone to have legal authority over all of his monetary affairs. And kind of a right of attorney to do anything that the husband can do. And he tells the apotropos, any vows that my wife makes from now until I get back, I want them to be nullified, right? And he does, and the apotropos does it, and he hears the wife does it, and he nullifies that. Can it be that would work? Would they be nullified? No, because the pasuk says ishaha means ish shela. Her husband can ratify it, and her husband can nullify it, but not apotropos. This is something that he has to do himself. Now we continue that discussion continues. Amar lo Rabbi Yonatan, masinu b'chol haTorah kula shilucho shel adam kemoto. We always find that an agent of a person can act as a person. So how come the apotropos cannot act as his agent? Okay, now we're going to analyze and bring the question and bring the proof. ואפילו רבי יאשיהו לא קמד אלא משום דגזרת הכתוב הוא אישה יקימנו ואישה יפרנו. אבל דכולי עלמא שלוחו של אדם כמותו. We see a machloket in the Mishnah between Rabbi Yoshia, who says that no, the apotropos cannot do it, as Rabbi Yonatan said, a person can always make a shaliach, and therefore the apotropos can do it. Fine. But even, that's a machloket only about the apotropos. But even Rabbi Yoshia, his problem is only that there's usually you can make an agent, but here the pasuk goes out of its way to say the husband can do it, has to do it himself, no one else can do it. But he would agree, even Rabbi Yoshia would agree, everyone would agree, that in other cases, a person can appoint an agent. And so the only problem here is the technicality of whether he can be appointed as an agent or not. But leaving aside that issue, but no matter what, this agent did not hear about the particulars of the vow. When the husband says, go and nullify all vows that will be in the future, so he's authorizing it already from this point when it's only a generality. And so the husband doesn't know the generalized at that point, and neither does the agent. The husband only knows the generalities, and the agent also does not know the particulars of the vows that are going to be said in the future. So isn't that a proof that yes, you can nullify all vows in a general statement, and you don't have to know the particulars? And we reject this one also. Here it's also when the husband says to the agent, listen, when I hear about them, I want them to be nullified. So that when he comes back, and then then I'll hear about them. You'll tell me about them. She'll tell me about them, and only then they're going to be nullified. But I have to know the particulars. So we ask, well, in that case, let him just wait till he hears them, and then he'll nullify it. What's the point of him telling the agent that I want them from now? I want them nullified. And the answer is, Husabar dilma mitridana, because the husband is thinking, listen, I might be preoccupied at the time that I hear them. I might be busy with other things, and then I'm not going to have a chance. So you know what? I want to let you know from now. I want everything nullified, even though that by itself will not take effect automatically. But when he hears about it in particular, then he'll be able to nullify it. But it does not get nullified until he actually does hear the particulars, and therefore we leave this off without an end, without a proof. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen v'Amen.